Moving on to the first intermezzo of the day, before I introduce our next speaker and guest, I have a small, I would say a fun fact block dedicated to doing things online. So obviously, people tend to do quite different things online when they are on different calls, as you can imagine, from ironing their clothes and, doing whatnot. I know we have a dedicated crowd, but some needs need to be met. So we envision this as a 30-minute segment where we are going to have a keynote from a successful founder who fundraised some quite nice money, and they're working their way up the growth path, as well as actually hearing the investors from the investor pitch, reverse pitching the opportunity to the whole audience here on Zoom and watching us via Expo channel, to actually what they are looking for, what they are offering and whatnot. That being said, I think Dan is here with us. Dan, you can unmute and turn on the camera. Dan is a co-founder and CEO of Sounder.fm, a startup which is also present partially here in Serbia, who are just now finalizing their next round of investment. And Dan will be able to tell us more about what's and how's and where's and bits and pieces behind their story. So then I see that you are unmuted, but we can't see you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. And we can see you now.
Perfect. I cannot see you. I just see a black screen, but thank you for that introduction. I want to do a quick time check, and I'll set my clock here. How much time do we have?
15 minutes.
Perfect. All right, I will set that now. As mentioned, my name is Dan Doherty. I am one of the co-founders and COO of Sounder.fm, which is an end-to-end audio technology platform, right now specific to podcasting. And I wanted to structure this over the next 15 minutes a little bit differently, unconventional. And I wanted to focus on really three forces that have positively affected both my life as well as my business career. This is the third company that I've founded. And those three forces are risk-taking, and de-risking. The second is serendipity, which I'll talk more about. And the third is the network effect and leveraging your network to accelerate business growth. I've never wanted to be an entrepreneur, quite frankly. In fact, growing up, my parents had a small construction company, and I would always hear them fighting about money. And I thought, why would I ever want to be an entrepreneur? That all actually changed as a first real world experience internationally in college. I was actually fortunate enough to do importing and exporting at a bank called Banco Mercantil in Caracas, Venezuela. And to keep the story short, the first day that I flew into Caracas, I was actually kidnapped and robbed by two men who pretended that they were taxi drivers. And that opened up my eyes to the world. Being a 20-year-old growing up in the United States was obviously way different than going to a third world country in Venezuela. And that was my first taste of risk and figuring out ways to de-risk that. From there, I wanted to really work for a very small company at the time called Google. And I did everything I possibly could to figure out how I could eventually start working at Google. And they had about 200 employees at the time, but I knew I did not have the experience in internet, in operations, in sales to actually start working at Google. So what I started to do is I moved to Northern California. I found a job in Fremont, California, which is near San Francisco. And I started working for a small startup. It's a search engine for embedded systems engineers. There was 3 people at the time, and I was the 4th. I used that to leverage my experience to then get into Google. And this is where serendipity comes into play. At this company, which is right next to a liquor store, no branding whatsoever, serendipitously, a woman by the name of Christina Walter actually walked in. And as the door opened, we had those little bells. And she said, "Hi, my name is Christina, and I work for a company called Google. Would you be interested in learning more about online advertising?" And I thought, wow, this is the time for me to really take advantage of this situation and make sure that Christina leaves with knowledge that I want to work for Google. And what happened there is she helped me get into Google, into interviewing over 2 days. And that was my first step into really a startup with lots of capital. Within 3 months, I decided to take another opportunity within Google and start the Denver office. And that allowed me to really become an entrepreneur within a very well-funded company to grow from $1 million in revenue to over $100 million in revenue. And I started to roll out and to develop my network by surrounding myself with very smart, hardworking individuals. Now, post IPO of Google, which was in 2004, I started to invest in real estate in Colorado. And I bought 9 rental properties within 9 months. And I had a personal frustration. That frustration was, how do I rent out my properties at scale? How can I post my property and use technology to post my property on Craigslist and rentals.com and so forth? And I decided to take a risk and leave Google in 2005 to start my first company based upon personal frustration. I have always said that if you can leverage the power of your personal frustration, that can be the catalyst to future innovation. And when you look at future innovation, how can you build something that's 10x better than what's currently on the market today? Most likely, if you're solving your personal frustration in a growing large market, others are having those same experiences as well. That was my first company. At that company, and this is where Europe comes into play, at that company, I decided to no longer spend about $3 million a year on engineering and overhead within the US. They wanted free food. They wanted slides within our office space. And I decided to look outside of the US. And we tried India, and we tried Poland, and we even tried China. But serendipitously, I ran across a company called Verteez, which at the time was one of the leaders in vertical search technology based in Novi Sad, Serbia. And one of the co-founders, his name was Goran. In 3 months, they built a prototype for me that my engineers would not be able to accomplish within a year or even a 2. And that was the catalyst and the aha moment for me to say, wow, how do I take advantage of leveraging Europe in a way that's more cost effective, harder working, and quite frankly, smarter engineers than I was getting in the US. And I decided to bring Goran over as my CTO for the first company. And 5 years later, we built out Novi Sad, Serbia office. And about 2 years ago, we had additional frustrations within the audio space. And we decided to then say, how can we be 10x better than anything else that is out there? So we decided to launch Sounder.fm. Goran is my co-founder. And back to the third force of growing out my network, leverage your network on a day-to-day basis. You have to nurture it and grow it. And a great example of that is with the current company that I'm in today. Is our co-founder, Cal Amin, was actually our first investor in Sounder. And he and I worked together at Google 20 years ago. And we've created a dialogue and had investment opportunities over the last 20 years. And nurturing that network allowed for that trust and that ability to work together for him to be not only the first investor, but come on board as a co-founder and CEO of Sounder.fm. And from that network, we leveraged his connections to get into meetings that maybe we could not have done individually or with just me by myself or with Garan. So to leave you with that, 3 things that I would focus on again is how do you de-risk? We're all taking risks on a daily basis, especially going from idea stage to prototype to then generating revenue. How do you figure out how to de-risk that in a variety of different ways? 2, by leveraging your network and growing it and nurturing it, serendipity starts to happen. And you'll, just like in the US, if I buy a new car, for example, I start seeing other similar cars of the same color everywhere that I go. They've always been there. I just opened my eyes to seeing others that were out there. So that leads to serendipitous interactions that hopefully will inevitably grow your business in ways that you're not thinking about today. So I'll leave you with that. I probably have some time. I don't know if you want to open up for question and answer, but I want to leave you with that.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for sharing the insights. We actually have a minute or two if somebody from the audience has a question for you. So this is a one-time offer before we move to the next part. Do we have any questions for Dan he would like to cover? I guess not. So Dan, again, thank you for sharing the story with us and joining us. I know it's early in the morning there, so we're really appreciative.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Of your time. And getting up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.